The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, good morning, folks. My name is Jack Allsop, Technical Services for Storagecraft in the APAC region. We've decided to run this series of deep dives again on the relevant products within Storagecraft's range. Today's one obviously is the basics of ImageManager. So I'll just quickly start. ImageManager, folks, is all about managing the files generated from ShadowProtect, but only from the perspective, should really only be from the perspective of a continuous incremental job. So I'll just double click on one of my jobs so we can see what's going on. Okay, continuous incrementals, Sunday through to Saturday, 4 o'clock in the morning, well 3 minutes past 4 to 11:03 at night, every 30 minutes, 39 backups a day. Okay, and because I am using continuous incrementals, if I go to the advanced tab, you will see there is no retention because the expectation is that you are using ImageManager. Okay, so from that perspective, folks, that's all. You should never ever, if I was to go and create a new job, okay, I don't know, let's pick a drive, which that's my backup drive, but it doesn't matter for the moment. Okay, put it somewhere else. I know what we'll do. We'll go back. Sorry, folks. We will select one of these.
What's his email? I think I can, yes. Just tell me it. Do you want to just transfer him to me? Put him on part?
Would somebody, whoever is talking, please turn off their microphone so that doesn't disturb everybody else? Thank you kindly.
What's your email?
We'll pick this particular drive. Okay. Yep. Sorry, I need to unselect that one. We'll pick this particular one. You could use ImageManager for a weekly schedule, but you must never ever do one thing, and that's called consolidation. The same with a monthly backup. Never ever use consolidation or retention because ShadowProtect has those covered. Okay, so it's only purely and simply for continuous incrementals, folks. So from that perspective, I will just now exit, and I'll come back into ImageManager. This is the basics of ImageManager. Now, ImageManager is free. Download it from ftp.storagecraft.com.au, install it, and let's go through the basics of setting this thing up. We're only ever going to cover, I do not intend to cover any replication today whatsoever. This is the basics of ImageManager, and you need to understand what's happening at this time. All right? So we've installed ImageManager, we've logged into ImageManager, and we're going to go to agent settings. Okay, the default.
Already started, it'll put you straight into the go-to meeting. It should do that.
Excuse me, folks. Home here. Hopefully that'll stop it. Okay, folks, sorry about that. Somebody in the background is talking who's also logged in as a presenter. Hopefully that'll stop in a moment. ImageManager, folks, does processing, which I'll explain in a bit of detail very shortly, but the default setting here is midnight. My first strongest tip that I can ever give you is please take it off midnight. Okay, never ever do anything associated with Storagecraft, ShadowProtect or ImageManager at midnight. Get it off. Do not do it on the hour, ever. Just get it off, okay? It can potentially prevent issues, especially with time changes, especially if you're running virtualized ImageManager servers and they're getting their time set from somewhere else. If I was actually running this as a virtual machine, I would actually be changing that to probably 10 or 15 minutes past midnight. But because it's physical, 3 minutes past midnight, I'm comfortable with that. First crucial point. Now, the next one. we'll read the top line, and it says Aegis performance impact on other intensive IO-intensive applications. ImageManager doesn't require a lot of CPU. It doesn't require a lot of memory. What it does require is fast disk I/O. Okay, so if you only got one folder, yeah, it's not a real problem. Start putting 80 folders in place, 80 managed folders, and there's maybe 2-3 sets of, like a C and E and an F drive in there. It starts to become an issue if you don't set up your ImageManager service correctly. So be aware of this. The only thing ImageManager really wants lots of is disk access, disk I/O, high performance, good SATA hard drives, in the appropriate array 6, something like that, perfect. Doesn't need to be anything quicker than that, because we've got one that I know of kicking around that's over 100 managed folders, and it still manages to keep up, and it's only on SATA hard drives. So the default for this, obviously, too, is to drag it down. Its default's about here somewhere. I always go, no. This disk is set aside purely and simply for, and it's only one disk, okay? Purely and simply for ImageManager. Go as fast as you can. Now, I am going to mention a few things here, folks. That's part and parcel of knowing the basics of ImageManager. This is as much as I'm going to deal with replication. Okay? Replication throttling for intelligent FTP, shadow stream, and cloud. Somebody might say, yes, I'm going to have a maximum transfer speed of 2 meg. Now, between the hours of, say, 7 a.m. and we'll go for 7 p.m., you're only allowed to use, and we'll go, say, 1 megabit, okay? Does this work? Sure it does, okay? But you need to understand one thing, because if somebody goes down the bottom here and changes it, remember, these are all global settings, folks. If I go down and say maximum replication and head start restore jobs process simultaneously, the default is 1. If I go 2, it's going to double these numbers. If I go 3, it will triple these numbers, because these numbers are per managed folder. Okay? Not overall for ImageManager, but per managed folder. So you'll see here that somebody's going to go 3. So they're allowed for the maximum transfer is 6 meg. Okay, and 3 meg. All right, that's the first thing you need to be aware of. Just recently, I saw somebody try to do this, and it took me 2 seconds. I actually got off the phone call and then had to ring them back, because I thought there's something wrong with that. That won't work, folks. The best minimum transfer speed you can regulate, and we're assuming here that it's greater than a certain number, the smallest you can go here is 256. Okay? You can't go below 256. It just will not deal with less than 256. If you try to use, for example, intelligent FTP at 256, it starts basing it on CPU slicing, and so what you get is this traffic jam, a stop-start situation that will not function for you, folks. But we'll deal with that next week. Just some basics. Remember, per managed folder, folks. Okay? All right. Global retention, folks. Some of these numbers are not going to make a lot of sense to you just at the moment, and that's okay. We'll talk about the basics behind all of this later on, okay? And I honestly can't remember what the defaults were originally, folks, but I think there's something like 7, 14, 90. We won't do this, and we will do that. I think that's the basics of when you first install it. And I'll talk about the individual numbers here in a moment, but just some basics for what I recommend for people to do. Okay? It says here, move all consolidated image files to a subdirectory instead of deleting them. You go, hang on a minute. that's going to shift them to a particular folder. You're going to run out of disk space really quickly. Organize this part of it so you don't have to do this. Okay? Now, let's pick a typical file server, shall we? Based on the expectation you set for your customers, and whether your customers are actually external customers to your company because you're a reseller, or internal because they're users of your organization's data, to me it's irrelevant. You just need to set the expectation correctly with management. Keep the intradaily files. Okay? Let's go down here, folks. Let's quickly have a look at these files so we know what we're talking about. Okay? See this series of files here? There should be about 39 of the little darlings. 40 of them. Well, there you go. Okay? There's 40 30-minute incrementals throughout the day for my C drive. They total up to this thing called 3.58 gig. And then I end up with a collapse daily. That's this one. Okay? They're the intradailies. They're the collapse dailies. All right, so that happens for, a week. And then those collapse dailies, and I've got to go back this way, hopefully, those collapse dailies will become a collapsed weekly. 4 collapse weeklies are going to become a collapsed monthly, and this is that consolidated rolling monthly file. Okay, and we'll come back to that now we've sort of got an idea. For most organizations, what I would be inclined to do for, say, their file server is specify here 14 days for the intradailies, those 30-minute incrementals. 14 days basically means that each of those days, as I showed you just a minute ago, the youngest file in that chain, okay, there's the 40-odd files. We're only interested in this one. Okay, the rest are treated as part of this as a set. So here we're saying 14 days. At processing time, and we'll get into processing time again in a little minute, it goes through and it basically says, are you, at the end of processing, it says, are you now 14 days old? No, you're not. Fine, I'll leave you alone. When it does become 14 days old, it says, fine, you and all your siblings will now be deleted. Okay, they're all the dependents. Well, this thing's dependent on all of them, okay? So it deletes them as a set. So for most people, I go 14 days. And then it says keep the consolidated dailies, the CD files, for 14 days. So there's 7 collapsed dailies. What the heck do we do with 7 collapsed dailies, folks? Well, it basically changes it to a collapsed weekly. Again, we'll go through the pruning process, but it creates a collapsed weekly. It then says to the youngest one of the collapsed dailies, you have to be 14 days old. So basically, I'm keeping the collapsed dailies for all but 3 weeks with the 14-day thing here. And then the collapsed weeklies, there are 4 collapsed weeklies. 1 month out of a 2-year process, you'll probably find there will be 5 collapsed weeklies, but generally there's 4. And we're saying those 4 collapsed weeklies, which are then used to produce what's called a collapsed monthly, the default here is saying 90 days. Okay? I find that to be a little over the top, but understand what we're trying to achieve. I would normally go for something like 60. And then for most people, I go clean up consolidated monthly files. You'll see this particular pop-up. It says make sure, it says do not enable this option unless you're certain your backup images are created by ShadowProtect 5 and later. Basically make sure the last incremental in the chain was done with ShadowProtect 5 and later, and then you're fine. You do not have to recreate chains, because I've got chains in North Sydney that are 4 years old. The last incremental, obviously, when I turned this on, was done with ShadowProtect 5 and above. Okay? And yes, we accept that. The default that I would normally put in here, well, the default is obviously 12, and I would leave it at 12, unless you've got a specific argument, reason to go otherwise. For our own organisation, what you see here, except that, That's what I have in place as a global setting for all servers. There are certain servers that I override. For example, our accounting server I override here and I change that back to 12. Okay? But it's all purely and simply about retention processes. Okay? Even if I was to leave it at that, I would use less disk space. Whoops, we will untick that. I would still use less disk space using this process on a continuous incremental chain structure than I would if I was using weekly schedules and having a rotation of, keep 3. I would still use less disk space. Okay? But I've got the same chain stretched back over a period of time. Okay, locations, folks, purely and simply becomes exactly what it looks like. It's like destinations in ShadowProtect. Create them in isolation before you use them. So I've got an ESX one and I've got an FTP one. Apart from that, folks, not much we need to worry about. They're the basics of it. Now let's start looking at the managed folder itself. Let's just go and have a look at the folder. Okay, the only thing I've done here is I've assigned the sort priority of 1 to make sure it always stays at the top of my list in case I add others for testing purposes at some point in time. Okay. Folks, we now need to look at managing folders and exactly what goes on. Alright, I'm just going to check. I don't believe I do have anything here, which is a bit of a crying shame. But that's okay. Don't need it. Alright, when I add in, and I'll just start managing a folder, folks. And I'll come down to here and I'll add in the cloud one. That'll do. Okay, assign a sort priority, or you can leave it alone if you want. I always, if I've got more than 10, I will always just assign a sort priority so that I'll always have the more important servers done first. And therefore the default is 255, which just becomes alphabetical. If I now go 2, it becomes the second in my list. Okay, you'll see here that cloud comes up with unknown because there are no backups in that particular directory. Okay, nothing. And it's just like that. So I could actually take a backup, and I just pick the E drive, folks. It's a nice small one. And I'll just go copy of that. And I'll just go there, and I'll just go paste. Okay. See how immediately it's seen it and see what it's now doing? Verifying. This is a crucial feature. So if I go back up to here, this one in particular, and we'll now start going through some folders because I want you to see exactly the process. With your permission, folks, I am going to stop managing that folder and I'll just get rid of it. Okay. Here's my normal folder, that particular folder. Let's go through. Okay. And it says immediately verify newly created image files. And if you always watch down the bottom here, you should see at least a couple throughout this webinar. You'll see it pop up down the bottom, verifying. Why are we immediately verifying newly created image files? The whole concept behind ImageManager is it's not that we don't trust ShadowProtect. We don't trust where ShadowProtect is backing up to. Our fixed image repository, as I prefer to call it. Fixed image repository. It immediately verifies those newly created image files because it's checking that the file has not been changed in any way when it landed on that disk. And it's got 2 ways of doing it. If you use MD5s, it'll use MD5s. If you don't have MD5s, it'll use an internal process called SB-run, which creates the ShadowProtect backup in the first place. But it checks the file out to make sure it hasn't changed. This next one's a really, really interesting one. It says periodically re-verify existing image files every 7 days. Okay. an explanation on this one, folks. You deserve it. That's what needs to happen. So, every 7 days it's going to automatically re-verify. I'm going to go down here, and a lot of people seem to struggle for some reason with this shortest path chain terminology. You see all these incrementals here? And I showed them to you just a minute ago, that whole chain. Any one of those from there back to the base can be part of a shortest path chain, but at processing time, which I'm going to do in a minute, I'm going to force processing to happen. You're going to see what it does. So what ImageManager does at processing time is it says that's the last incremental. So it automatically, and I'm just going to cheat here by just, well, it's not cheating, but showing you the process. This will automatically show me in a couple of seconds what the shortest path chain is. And you can see there I'm going back through all these incrementals till I hit this collapse daily. Okay? There's the collapse daily, and it goes back through all. It's bypassed all those other ones because they're not part of the shortest path chain. So there's a whole bunch of collapse dailies. We go up to collapse weekly, collapse monthly, consolidated rolling monthly, and the base. So that list of files there, folks, if it was the appropriate day, of course, becomes the list of files it will use in this process. Periodically re-verify existing image files every 7 days, the shortest path chain. It says, and the easiest way to do this, folks, is if there are 7 managed folders here, it will do 1 folder a day. If there are 21 managed folders, it's going to do 3 a day. Okay? And what it does is it takes that shortest path chain, all right, and processes it and says, okay, that's the shortest path chain. It hands it off to the secondary queue. There is 2 queues. And it hands it off the secondary queue and says, look, would you please re-verify those particular files, and if there's a problem, let me know. Otherwise, I'll expect you to do your job, and we'll all go through. Okay? It's a crucial fact because this processing time, and I'm going to go through that in a couple of minutes, folks. It is very, very critical. It happens every day because how else do you know you haven't got a broken chain? Okay? I protect my fixed image repositories very well. I won't let anybody near them because humans have a tendency to make mistakes at odd times. We all do. The best of us will make a mistake and delete the wrong file. Okay? And I don't want a broken chain. How do I know I've got a broken chain? ImageManager will tell me every day. All right, the next thing, consolidation settings. Now, can you use ImageManager for a weekly schedule? Absolutely. Everything we've talked about so far? Sure. But untick this. Do not do consolidation. Not on a weekly schedule because you're just going to confuse ShadowProtect. Leave it alone. Don't do consolidation. But because I'm using continuous incrementals, folks, I am going to tick this box to say enable image file consolidation. My last day of the week is Saturday. So 3 minutes into Sunday morning, it says fine, the end of the week was yesterday, I'll deal with yesterday and turn it off, do the collapse weeklies and bits and pieces like that. Okay? This last one here is the monthly consolidation. What day to include in consolidated monthly images? I always leave it at the 31st. If there are 30 days in the month, ImageManager automatically knows, well, guess what? That's the end of the month. I will use that. Okay? I've seen some people say, I want a relative weekday. That to me gets messy because it's not a true representation at the end of the month, folks. Okay? All right. And then we have this retention settings where I am allowed to override the global setting and change things. So if this was my accounting server, you know, I might keep that box ticked. Oh, yeah, go away, leave me alone. And I might change that to 12, yes? And do things like that. I might change that to 14 and this to something else and whatever. Okay? Now, folks, I'm going to do processing twice as if it was 3 minutes past midnight. The first time I'm just going to let it go through. Then I'm going to break a chain and show you exactly what happens. Okay? And I'm going to pick my E drive, which is my smallest. It's just got my page file and my Windows temporary directories. It's easy to repair. If I pick my F4G drives, we could be here for 7 or 8 hours. So I don't intend to do that. First thing I want you to do, folks, when I press this button down here, is I want you to watch this number and this number. Okay? Because if there's any errors whatsoever in here, ImageManager will throw them over its left shoulder. Says, I don't know what's in this managed folder in terms of size and or number of files. So just watch those, folks. I'm going to come down here and say start processing. With the later versions of ImageManager, you just, because I've highlighted this folder, it will just manage that folder. In the past, it used to do every folder, which became a pain. We just want this folder. So watch those two numbers up there, and I'll go start, and I'll go OK. See how they disappear? What's this? What it's doing here, folks, is, as you can see it, synchronizing. What it does is it basically says, all right, I have a database that tells me something, but I'm going to assume that that database is empty at the moment. I will look down on the physical disk and I will see what's down there. How many files do I have down there? How big are those files? It will then open up the database and do a comparison. Okay? At that point in time, it's done two things. It confirms it knows everything about each file that's in there because it's already in its database. The second thing it's doing is checking it has a valid chain. The third thing it's doing, if it's the appropriate time of the 7-day period, it says, oh, here's the shortest path chain, secondary queue, please verify. Okay? So there's the three things it's doing. So now what I want to do is I'm going to pick up my E drive. And if I was to delete one of these, it probably won't say anything because it'll just say, okay, there's a bunch of orphan files there and this chain's no good. Okay? But with your approval, folks, I'm going to take that one, 1529, and we're going to be very polite with that file. Are you sure you want to delete this thing? Well, yes, I'm an idiot, so please do so. Yes? I'm going to do the processing again, folks, to validate some of the bits and pieces I've been talking about. Okay? Yes, please process that folder. Yes, please do. Notice exactly what I'm expecting to see. My chain is broken. I will be getting emails. I'll be getting, watchdog alerts, whatever I'm using. The chain is incomplete. It is useless to do it. Now, here's the interesting thing. I'll open up ShadowProtect, and I'm going to go to the backup jobs, and I'm going to select the E drive, and I'm going to go right-click, execute, and incremental. Have a little bet with yourself, folks. Will this fail or will this succeed? It's going to succeed. Okay? Sure has. Why? Because ShadowProtect on a continuous incremental chain only looks at the last incremental. This chain is broken. So if I go down here to 1530, that tells me the chain's broken. Yes? So if I go down here to 1530, and as you well know, that is broken, folks, but we'll prove it. But we are going to prove it. Yes, there we go. It says nothing. Confirm or change image file to be mounted. There's no image file selected. It says I can't do it. So how do I fix this? Purely and simply, what I'm now going to do, folks, is obviously repair this chain. If somebody deletes these other ones, I'm going to leave that alone for next week, not today. It's more about showing you the basics of ImageManager. I'll now go down here to ShadowProtect. I will take that E drive again and I'll say, now would you please execute another incremental. See here? unable to access that last one, VDIF is turned on, which if you remember your ShadowProtect basics, VDIF is the bitmap kernel file that records all change sectors. It now is going to go down and do what's called a differential. So you can see here, it's basically mounting up the shortest path chain, all right, to work out what it's going to have to do to recreate that break in the chain. And it'll just be busy doing that for, it's very disk intensive doing this, folks, very disk intensive. I don't know that I'll be quick enough to do it, but yeah, let's try. Okay. That's where it's reading from, that's where it's writing to. It's got to basically open up everything to try and work that out, folks. Okay, so I can just close this down now, and I can see that I've got 1533 to 1528. Now you and I as humans are going to go, hang on a minute, there seems to be a problem here. Well, there isn't a problem for ShadowProtect, and there isn't a problem for ImageManager because they don't use the file names as such to validate chains. I'll show you what I mean. So here we go. Let's go processing for the last time. Again, watch the numbers. Go start, go OK. No broken chain. Okay? So ImageManager is now happy, but you notice at processing time, it is checking that chain. And you're probably thinking to yourself, but hang on a minute, how can that be a valid chain? I'll quite simply show you here, folks. The file GUID, this particular file has that GUID, its parent has that GUID. So we're just going to use FF2CC. FF2CC 732. That's how ShadowProtect, and that's how ImageManager in particular will track which file is valid. Okay? So, if I go back to ImageManager, it now says the chain's no longer broken, I no longer have an issue with the chain, and it will just continue on like normal. Alright? So, a couple other things we need to do, folks, in the basic session. Okay, before I ask if there are any questions, I will not answer any questions about replication at this point, folks. Okay, that's next week's special. Today, the basics of this. But the final thing here is notification settings. Okay? You set up the basics here. Now, obviously you set up your email settings with your server and all those sorts of bits and pieces. But in here, failures, warnings, inactivity. This is one way of finding out if you've got no other tool to do so. Inactivity, the default here from memory is 7 days. So what you're going to tell me is, if I don't get a backup into this folder in 7 days, I better tell somebody? I got a problem with that. You better tell me about it straight away, thank you kindly. Yes? So I've gone for 1 day. If there has been no backup into a particular folder in a 24-hour period, you tell me about it. Okay? The next one that I find rather interesting is low free space. The default setting for that is that. By the time you get an email that I'm down to 5% free space, you can't do anything. Your hands are tied. You'd have to hope like crazy you know what you're doing and perhaps start deleting some of the intra-dailies that are no longer required, or collapse dailies, collapse weeklies, whatever. 5% is far too low, folks, honestly. It's far too low. I prefer 25% because it gives me somewhere to go. And obviously it has to be based on, your understanding of how big this image repository is, because I'm using a 1.3 or it's 1.5 terabyte USB 3 hard drive on my laptop. Okay, I know it's not really an approved fixed image repository, but you know, it's the best I can do for a laptop. I've set it at 25%. When I'm down to 25%, you better start telling me so that I can start doing something about it, getting rid of some stuff, recreating a couple of backups if I need to, whatever. Okay? So that one there obviously is an important feature. All right? Now, a couple of final things for you folks. This is ImageManager Log. This is the actual ImageManager service log, folks, and I just bring it down here. I restarted it this morning because I was doing a few updates to the drivers on my system, but that's cool. You can see here that this is on startup. It tells me the version I'm currently using, concurrent jobs, concurrent folders, the REST port that it's using to communicate with ImageManager. It tells me the IP address, blah, 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 blah. Yes, you can see all the bits and pieces that it's doing, okay? And it even spits it into there that failed. So that is the ImageManager itself log. There's a basic FTP log. And this is the managed folder log, okay? A little bit up in the corners there, stopping me from doing a few bits and pieces. But you'll notice here, this was basically when I started doing a forced processing, and it says SB verification succeeded, syncing, enumerating, no new files, W1 sets are updated. It sees these particular files, okay, and that's when they're next going to be verified. There's the dates there that it will do the next re-verification process. You can see the retention process thread done. We're adding this, okay. Why is it that mine seems to have a lot more detail in it than what you would normally expect? Little tip for you folks, if you want to make sure that ImageManager is doing exactly what you think it should be doing, and you can see here it says primary queue, which you won't see in a normal log, okay. Little tip for you folks. Simply we're going to go to our registry. We'll go to the services, we will go to ImageManager, and we got parameters, and we got locations, which we all know what a location is. We got watches. Here's my watch. As you can see, I'm watching the H:\alien laptop. If you want more specific information about this particular managed folder, okay, and I'll come down to replicate, and I'll come down and you can see I've got a replication job, which is fine. We're not worried about that today. You'll notice here that I put in a regd word called detailed logging. The default for detailed logging is 1, which is just the basic information. If you need to troubleshoot at all whatsoever any component of ImageManager, you go to either the watches folder to do them all, you go to a particular watch folder to do it, or you go to a particular replication job and you do it. Okay? Narrow it down to what you're looking for, folks. I've got it set on my watches, and it says detailed logging, and it's decimal 4. That gives me nice verbose logging so that I can actually see the queues are all working, all the other bits and pieces and whatever else. Okay? All right. We'll close that down so that it can just do whatever it wants to do, folks. We'll let that go. And we're back to that place. All right. I think I've talked enough. Are there any questions whatsoever, folks? Oh, somebody's pretty quick off the... Oh, hang on. There's a whole heap of questions here. You're going to have to forgive me, folks, for a minute. All right, let me read the first one. Does ImageManager Agent process time affect remote replication time? Yeah. I'm just wondering whether I should answer this today or tomorrow or next week. I'll give you the brief answer. In the past, yes, we used to say 11:45 if I'm replicating to another site, and we would have it at 10 past 12 and 11:45 on PM on the local site. It used to be in version 6 and 6.01 of ImageManager. Fairly critical you did that. It is no longer critical. Full explanation next week, sir, if you don't mind. We've dealt with it internally within the application, so I'll leave that question alone at this point. You'll notice here that mine is set up to do it at 3 minutes past midnight. As long as it's just past midnight, that's all you need to worry about these days. Next week I'll give you the explanation why. Question there, can we please mute that person? I will personally mute that person who was chatting earlier on. I'll ring him up later. Gentleman here, just trying to find, don't know ImageManager. Yep. Okay. Yep, cool. All right. Okay, I'm going to answer a couple of these questions. There's a whole range of questions all rolled into one here. Folks, most people would like to know a simple question about, and it's not really to do with ImageManager, but it could be, based on, and for example, if I go back to agent settings and I'll go global retention again, and we'll just go for some fairly basics. 7, 14, 60, and we'll go 12. Yes? Most people are asking the question, size my fixed image repository for this style of retention policy per customer. Okay? And I think that's a fairly valid question, I guess, because I'm so used to dealing with it now that I have a tendency to bypass it. So my apologies, good question, and we'll try to answer it now. Okay? It really comes down to how long's a piece of string, which is an unsatisfactory answer, and I understand that. So what I'm going to do is show you. Okay, I would just like to show you the solution. And what's the point of showing you my laptop? That doesn't achieve anything. So, and I don't want to get into questions about this particular piece of software. It's just not my aim today. I just want to show you a particular server. Okay. The basic calculation that I use, folks, is raw data size multiplied by 0.6 multiplied by 6. It should give you probably 15 to 20% fluff overall. You know, a bit of space to move, but raw data size multiplied by 0.6 and multiplied by 6 for 12 months worth of storage. Agreed? And I'm just going to show you a server. Now, I'm going to show you our mail server, all right? And I'm going to go to the disks on our mail server. This stuff's updated every 15 minutes, so you can see. So, and let's just roughly take this as an example. That's 100 gig, and it's 50% used, yes? So I should have, if I make it 100 gig, it's 0.6, that's, sorry, it's 50% used, that's 50 gig. Should be about 35 odd gig for the C drive in disk usage. For storage, and then you sort of do the same calculation here. Agreed? So 50% of that multiplied by 0.6 and go for 0.6 for 12, multiplied by 6 for 12 months. Okay? So you work out your basic calculations on that. So let's now go across, and I'll go back to here, and I'll go to managed folder usage. And if you take a look at that top one, folks, 404 files totaling 800, let's make it 900 gig, shall we? Those files are spread over the last 4 years, continuous incrementals, with a retention policy. So you're looking at, say, 900 gig, and the retention policy on that particular server, whoops, sorry folks, I need to go to the ImageManager server on that one, so just bear with me. That's this one, and I will go for ImageManager on here, and STC mail. Seven, 14, 60, and 8. Okay, that's our mail server settings. 7, 14, 60, and 8. So that particular server that has disk sizes, whoops, if I go back to the mail server that has disk sizes of that, okay, for the last 4 years I'm using 900 gig. I know that's not an exact science, and it never ever will be, folks, but that's a mail server. A mail server is compressed to absolutely diddly squat. Okay? Let's go and pick on a file server, shall we? Here's our file server. And ignore that partition there, folks. It is not used for anything except Windows Update Services and our antivirus. The two that are critical is this one and this one. Alright? So let's say 600 gig. Let's make it 700 gig. Okay? 0.6 of 700 is what? And then multiply by 6. So let's now go back and have a look at the managed folder usage for that particular server for the last 4 years, because it's still February 2011 is its base. 723 files. I have a much larger retention policy on this one, and it's using 843 gig. Okay, I know it doesn't answer your question exactly, sir, whoever asked this particular question. About 3 or 4 people asked this style of question, but a good all-round number that I've been able to use over the years. By the way, folks, this number changed dramatically when we introduced pruning inside of ImageManager. Okay, and pruning inside ImageManager, if I just go back here, this is where you get these 39 or 40 files making 3.5 gig, and this thing is 2.9. That's pruning out sectors that are unnecessary. Okay, so based on the later image managers with pruning, it's not an exact science, but if you go the raw data set multiplied by 0.6 multiplied by 6, you will have a ballpark figure. because I can only give you a ballpark figure simply because if you've got a file server full of JPEGs, that ain't going to compress much. You got a SQL server, that's going to compress like there's no tomorrow. So all I can do is give you a ballpark, raw data set size. Okay, so if it's 100 gig of data, that means I'll have a base image of 60 gig, multiply that by 6, that's what I'll use for 12 months. Okay, based on the normal 714, potentially 12. Okay, as a ballpark figure. I'm sorry, that's as close as I'm able to get for you. If you start to run out of space on your disk image repository, folks, one of the simplest ways is either change the retention slightly to get rid of some of the other files, and I don't have a lot of them here today to show you. I know where I do have some. Bear with me for 2 seconds, folks. Bugger. Okay. Gets a bit messy to see with some of these other files kicking around. Let me just get rid of those files so it's easier for you guys to see it. By deleting these MD5s, I'm not going to cause any problems at all. The bitmap files, well, I can get rid of them too. Those bitmap files are used for the pruning process, folks. ImageManager will recreate the bitmap files that it needs to compensate for my stupidity. That's cool. All right. If you start to run out of disk space, some of the things that you can do is, first of all, make sure that folder is empty. If you didn't untick the box, it will probably be full. The second thing you can do, and it's only a temporary measure, folks, and you remember you will be losing points of recovery by doing this, but until you can actually do something with the disk, you need to deal with it. Some of the things you can do, for example, is get rid of those files because they are not part of the shortest path chain. You can see here I got a collapsed daily, so I can get rid of all the dailies in front of that if I needed to. I'm sure it's a manual process, and please do not delete the wrong thing. Okay? But yeah, once you start to run out of disk space, shift your retention policy a little bit to compensate until you can get a bigger retention or bigger fixed image repository around. Okay? So be careful of that one. All right. Let's see what else we have. I have a question here that I'm not exactly sure I understand. Why do we have to use ImageManager and why not use ShadowProtect directly? If you're using weekly schedules, you don't need to use ImageManager? Sure. Don't need it. Don't use it. Can it help you? Sure can. Because it can actually deal, and next week I will deal with it, local drive replication. Local drive replication is a free component of ImageManager where here, if I go cancel on there for a moment, I could add a replication target, which is local drive. Okay? And basically what local drive replication is the ability to mirror this onto a USB hard drive, and you could put them 5 or 6 of them in a rotation and take them off site. So if you're using weekly schedules, ImageManager gives you that capability to automatically do that instead of you having to write scripts and all that sort of stuff, which is not supported anymore in any way. But You know, if you don't want to use ImageManager and you're using weekly schedules, go for your life. Please, though, please do not do what I see an awful lot of people do lately, is rotate the backup drives because they think they're doing the right thing. That is definitely the wrong thing to do. If you want to have off-site copies, use ImageManager and local drive replication. Okay? All right. We'll go and see. My goodness. Just 2 secs, folks. I just lost my place in where we were up to with our questions. I'm trying to give everybody the opportunity to get their question answered. Okay. This particular person has asked a question. For some of our smaller customers, we have ShadowProtect perform a full backup, no incrementals, once a day to rotating USB hard drives. I've recently installed and started using IM as well as to verify and alert me if there have been no new backups. Is this a good idea? Well, putting ImageManager in is definitely a good idea, but could I ask you, sir, one question? Let me go here. This is my G drive. To back that up takes probably 4, 5 or 6 hours. I'm going to ask a simple question. Why do you want a server, computer, laptop, servers in particular, to do the same job day in and day out? You know, I simply say to you, if you are using ShadowProtect to do once a day backups, you are shortchanging yourself and your customer because you're not creating multiple incrementals throughout the day. You know, weekly schedules, by all means, go for your life, create a weekly schedule, a base on a Sunday, 20 incrementals Monday through to Friday, you know, but do not, under any circumstances, rotate that drive. That is my fixed image repository. Use ImageManager. Use one of those USB hard drives, and hopefully it's the better one. Use that as a fixed image repository and create the weekly schedules and do whatever, and then use ImageManager to rotate to that second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, whatever it is, hard drive. That would be the better way of dealing with it, and your customer has so many more recovery points, and these are what I'm talking about. For my C drive, how many recovery points do I have? 65. You know, I go back to here and I go back to our mail server, wherever it might be, and I'll just go to job history. That E drive, as it stands right here today, what is the shortest path chain back to the base? And there it is. Are there more files in there? Of course there are. There are more recovery points, but I selected that recovery point, and that's the shortest path chain back to the base from 4 years ago. Okay? It's all about multiple recovery points, but don't make your server do the same thing day in and day out. Okay? Hope that helps you. Interesting question. How often should we be refreshing image chains? Folks, it comes down to personal preference. When I say to most people, you know, you look at this particular chain. That base file was created 4 years ago, February 2011. It's over 4 years old today. No, 4 years old today, basically, you know, who cares? Most people would say I'm an idiot, I'm stupid, but I'm not. No, it's not uncommon for people today to have image chains 12 months old. Okay, it depends on your image manager. It depends on your fixed image repositories. Okay, depends on how many recovery points you're looking for over a 12-month period. For most people, I say, look, if you want to recreate the chain every 12 months, you go for your life. You do it. I have a customer here in Brisbane that's got 140 odd managed folders in their image manager server, and they create new bases once every 12 months. Okay, they're comfortable with that. Fine, let's make them comfortable. Our particular installation is, most of our servers were February of 2011 when the base images were created. It's entirely how comfortable you feel, but I also I have this available to me, where Watchdog is actually going and doing verifications against file allocation tables every night. So I'm more comfortable with our chain after 4 years than most people would be after 6 months, you know. But again, it's what you're comfortable with. Most people, I say 12 months, yeah, go for it. It's fine. This question. If consolidated weeklies and consolidated monthlies fall on the same day, will it skip consolidated weekly? Absolutely. Absolutely. You'll end up with what's called, if it happens to be the right time, you'll end up with a whole bunch of collapsed weeklies, like 3 collapsed weeklies. Potentially, it will always create the collapse daily, so you'll potentially end up with 7 collapse dailies and automatically go straight into a collapse monthly. It will bypass the collapse weekly. If it happens that way and you see it, you go, well, what happened to the collapse weekly? Don't worry about it. It's fine. It just treats it like normal. Okay? So yes, that does happen. Sorry, folks. If image manager... Interesting. I know the concept of this question. Gentleman just asked, and for the sake of the exercise, folks, I'm going to say, yeah, I'll do it. Some clown just deleted, and that clown is me, just deleted one of the collapsed files. And if I go and click on this, and we'll prove this in 2 seconds. Uh-oh, broken chain, yeah? Most people at this point, and look, quite rightly so, the first couple of times I would see it, I would go, oh, what do I do? Panic, that my whole day's just turned to cheese. You go, what the heck do I need to do to fix this? Because that's way back in the chain, and I got no way of rebuilding that chain. Do not automatically assume the only choice you've got is I have to start a new base. Look at where else, whether it's local drive replication, off-site replication, whatever the case might be, have a look around and say, can I get that file back from anywhere so that I don't have to recreate a chain and I then don't have to reseed a chain? The customer doesn't need to be any of the wiser. I mean, let's try to fix the problem behind the scenes. Well, I know that because, and again, I'm not going into replication, I know that because I've replicated, that file exists somewhere else. So if I can get a copy of it from somewhere else and put it back, like so, okay, I will do so. Try every other avenue you've got to put the broken part of that chain back before you have to go down the path of recreating a base. I mean, recreating a base of my C drive is not a problem. Okay? Have a look at this one. 396 gig. How about this one? 398 gig. Recreating some of those bases, or 1.2 terabyte base images, it's a pain in the butt to recreate them things, folks. So if it's possible, think about other ways of getting the file back before we go down that path. Okay? Right. I wouldn't go creating new incrementals because it's got to do differentials and stuff. Not something I've covered today, but I guess I'll have to answer the question. Local drive replication, folks, if you add it in, okay, and you pick the appropriate replication mode, yada, 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 and you start doing rotations on those, in the past, we found that some files would not be deleted. That would always, the proper way it's supposed to happen, folks, is the first drive goes in. We then basically mirror the fixed image repository down to that disk. 4 o'clock that afternoon, they swap that one out and put in the Tuesday one. And the same process. It sort of says, okay, fine, you're missing a whole bunch. It'll just copy them all down. Tuesday, 3 weeks down the track, when that Tuesday one came back, what's supposed to happen is, and I know it works for 14 drives in a rotation with 654 and above, what's supposed to happen is it will just say, oh, you're missing a few files, and add the extra files in. It will not purge the old ones until processing time. Okay? So it will not purge the old stuff off until processing time. You can't force processing and get it to do it. It has to do it at its normal processing interval where it does what's called a full sync and will then purge the rubbish off. Okay, folks? Any chance we could go over the broken chain repair again? Okay, we'll do it. I am going to pick my E drive. Just a bit of folks, I've got about 14 people trying to ring me. I'm just going to turn my phone off so they can't annoy us anymore. We are a little over time, but that's cool. Depending upon the size of the drive, depending upon what you're doing, if this file was deleted for some stupid reason, or this file was corrupted, or whatever the case might be, okay, and I've got all of this replicated off-site, okay, I would probably be inclined to delete the files after the chain was broken. I would go into ShadowProtect and I would go to the backup jobs and I would actually say pause that job, because it is a very disk intensive process to generate a differential. Therefore, what I would do is pause that job until after business hours. So at 6 o'clock tonight I would then come back in and I would go, righto, and I would kick off the incremental, let it do its differential. But I'm only talking about, these couple of files here, even up to this one. I sure as hell wouldn't, if somebody had gone and deleted, say, that file and said, right, do a differential back to the 7th of the 2nd, how about we delete the collapsed monthly, which is the 30th of the 1st? To do a differential from that point on would be detrimental to the server. It would just hammer the disk to the death. So, if I was to have lost a couple of these files here for some stupid reason, I would delete what's irrelevant, pause the job after business hours, kick off what we call the differential. If somebody had deleted this one here, I would be looking around to find somewhere else I've got that stored. USB hard drive, replicated to some data center somewhere, whatever the case might be, I would be trying to replace it somehow. Okay? Worst case scenario, if somebody deleted one of these files back here, you would have to kick off a new base for it, folks. Okay? But try to avoid the differentials if you can help it. I mean, I did it on my E drive because it's small and it's on an SSD hard drive. I can recover from that quickly. But I mean, these F ones, they're on an SSD hard drive as well, but it's going to take forever. It'll take longer to fix a differential on this than it would be to create a new base. It's not something you do lightly. If you can recover by restoring a file from somewhere else, that's what I recommend you should be doing. Okay? Is to the point, this question. Is there any... No, not wrong, sorry. Is there any documentation about the registry hacks possible with ImageManager? Registry hacks, sir? Registry modifications? No. Basically, if you need that detailed logging one, support will soon tell you how to turn it on. That's the only registry modification that can be done. Okay? Okay. Somebody's asked a question. If that file there, that consolidated monthly, was deleted, can I recover? Well, if the weekly still existed that was used to create it, sure. If they're not there, no. I do not recommend trying to do a differential in that case. Seriously, do not recommend you try to do a differential. Because if that was deleted, I have to delete everything from basically there to there. Okay? That differential process would take a damn long time. Okay? So, no. I'm not sure where this question came in. Broken change, you will get an email alert, absolutely, on the spot shortly after midnight. Okay? I think I've covered everybody's question, folks. Okay, I'll have to call it quits there. Two things I'd like to say, folks, in finishing with this. We are doing technical training in all the different regions. We just did Brisbane this week. We are doing a Gold Coast one. I think it's not next week, the week after. Melbourne and Adelaide are about a month away, but if you ring StorageCraft or sales@storagecraft.com.au, but if you ring the Sydney office on 02 8061 4444 and ask for the sales guys, they will tell you where the training sessions are being held. Okay? So, folks, at that point I'm going to have to say thank you very, very much for your time. I apologise we have gone over by some 13 to 14 minutes. I've tried to cover everybody's questions where possible, but I have simply run out of time today. I need to get on and get some other jobs done that I've promised customers. Folks, next Friday I will deal with replication. Okay, local drive, intelligent FTP, and shadow stream. Okay, so at that point, folks, I'm going to say thank you very, very much for your time, and please have a great weekend. Thank you.